it wasn't a matter of the resume, but it was the vocabulary and the understanding. I'll give you a good example of that. We had an ambitious idea of building it's almost 12 acres park right in the middle of downtown. It was just a vision at first, but now it's called Discovery Green. There were some private funds that needed to be raised. We put some public funds in the project, donated a couple of public tracts to the project, bought some private lands. People knew that I bargained very hard and got a good price for the land. And the company that was a seller I had some dealings with, tough negotiations in the private sector, they knew when I said take it or leave it, I meant take it or leave it. But then there was something else. When it came to private fundraising, I talked not simply about the great thing of building a community around the park, but what it would do for economic development. I was able to tell people what I thought with some credibility, which is that we would have, where there were surface parking lots, you would see people living close to where they work. In all the big urban areas of the country where you have, and of the world for that matter, where you have a great, active, safe, beautiful park in the middle of a large employment center, then you see people wanting to live next to that, wanting to shop next to that. And within a remarkable period of time, less than I envisioned, there was $1.3 billion or so of real estate development replacing the surface parking lots with shops, apartments, office space. And so people, in many cases, they didn't, and that helps everybody, because I'll tell you what, whenever you can get people to live closer to where they work, that decreases traffic congestion.
We'll move on to some of the more recent stuff. I want to ask about the BJ Services issue.
Mm-hmm.
This is something that Rick Perry has raised, and I'm sure will be an issue again in the campaign. Do you see anything wrong with your service on the board of directors of BJ Services while you were mayor of the city of Houston?
No, I mean, there was no conflict of interest at all. And my board involvement was fully disclosed. As a matter of fact, I sort of wanted to keep a business involvement, to keep my hand in business, because I enjoy business. And I had a couple of, it was a great company, still is a great company, and now it's merged into Baker Hughes. The city doesn't, drill wells using cement. So it was, and all board meetings were there in Houston. You didn't have to travel.
And your compensation, was that purely for your service on the board?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Some critics have raised the issue of their natural gas drilling in Barnett Shale, your position in terms of that, and what impact that has on the company financially. I believe you still have some ties with them, stock and
I do,
types of things.
yeah.
Do you see any conflict of interest in terms of, and I believe you're opposed to a moratorium on the drilling in the Barnett Shale, do you see any conflict of interest there between your position on the Barnett Shale and the company's stand, and your connection to them financially?
No, that is, I believed strongly, and I do believe, that natural gas and unconventional gas is the biggest source of natural gas of the country, should be an important part of the energy mix. I wrote my senior thesis in college on the natural gas business in the United States. When I worked in Congress as a kid, I pushed for more use of and changes in laws that would allow the substitution of more natural gas for coal and imported oil and heating oil. So this is something I gave speeches during, before, and after my government service, championing natural gas. I think it's critically important if we want to have cleaner air, if we want to have a growing economy, if we want to cut our dependence on foreign oil, then natural gas, domestic natural gas, is a very important part of that, period. And so, now, we should have good environmental standards and practices, and companies should abide by environmental standards. And in particular, I've heard if there are detection of excessive amounts of benzene, where I've heard it most is in connection with a processing plant, then there ought to be a standard, it ought to be applied, they ought to be monitored, they ought to be shut down if they don't apply to the standard, and the industry can do that. And the failure to have those standards is a responsible, that got to be TCQ, Railroad Commission, need to be involved. Of course, BJ doesn't have anything to do with the processing plants. It's really the underground fracturing itself, which is done. And fracturing in natural gas wells is nothing new, and for quite a while, fracturing has been the standard means of completing natural gas wells in most producing areas in the country.
Do you expect the Perry campaign to raise that as an issue?
Oh, sure. I mean, they make up stuff, so they'll say whatever suits them, regardless of the truth. But I'll tell you this: the shamelessness of the campaign. If you didn't have hydraulic fracturing of any sort on any gas wells in the United States of America, that would create a huge problem for electricity. Gas supplies would diminish. Onshore drilling in the United States would diminish. More coal would be used in power plants. Tens of thousands of Texans would lose their jobs. That's what would happen if there was no hydraulic fracturing. And you want it to be done by a good and reputable firm, and BJ is one of those firms. But at the same time, you may have seen it yesterday. Y'all probably printed in the Observer the fundraising letter he sent out, which claims that I want to destroy the energy business of Texas. So he'll talk out both sides of his mouth. It's sort of interesting. There are some who are in the Tea Party movement that I think have at least one important thing in common with a lot of the traditional readers of the Texas Observer, and that is they think that the government should be the servant and not the master. And too often it seems that there's people in Austin who think that they're entitled to power. They're entitled to live in a big fancy house in the hills around Austin. That's not right. We need somebody who will work for Texas and not work as a divisive ideologue. And I think there's a lot of Texans across the political spectrum who are ready for a new governor.